Lost Lancastrian, Episode 8. Illumination and Alignment. Imagine, if you will, being lost at sea. Not in a storm, not in furious winds and crashing waves. No, imagine it being perfectly calm. The water still as glass, reflecting the sky's vivid blue and bright sun overhead. The horizon seems perfectly flat, void of dimension or direction. There is nothing of any difference whichever way you look. Your only sense of space and form is the boat you're sat in. How do you find your way to the place you're seeking? There's no map, no compass, no GPS, only the endless void around you. How do you get to the place you don't even know for sure exists? This may seem like an intriguing thought experiment, yet what I'm describing is actually more of a metaphor of a very real experience I have found myself in for quite some time. A situation I don't believe to be unique. Recently, I've noticed a rise in the number of people online beginning to discuss the pandemic and its ramifications. There are still many out there that are clinging to crazy conspiracy theories, some so radicalized in their beliefs that they will threaten anyone who endangers their fantasy existence. Yet more people are starting to talk about it, talk about their experiences, our experiences, a period of shared trauma for so many reasons. Although this episode isn't about that experience, it is a reflection and an acknowledgement of something connected to it. A loss, an abandonment, an end to how I define myself without me changing how I define myself to others. That may sound a little confusing, but it will become more clear. The truth is, like I indicated in the last episode, I haven't really had a good grasp of myself and any sense of direction for close to 6 years. The pandemic isn't the only cause for my issues, but it was a kind of catalyst. The fact is, I stopped writing. I still think of myself, talk about myself, and express myself as a writer, yet I've not written really anything for years. There's some connection with my university experience here too. When I went to university to study philosophy, I was doing a lot of writing, but it was extremely dull standard academic drawl. The only point in the process of studying for that degree where I really became doubtful of my desire to continue was when I was starting to get exasperated at the constraints to writing. Then I was introduced to the existentialists, such as Sartre and de Beauvoir, and we were increasingly encouraged to write with flair. I had no idea what they meant by that, so experimented with more narrative and metaphorical language. Hey presto, the highest marks I'd managed. Yet that moment only opened up the taps, and suddenly I was getting more flamboyant and writing far more poetry than I had for a while. As I began working in communications and marketing while studying and beyond, I kept engaging in the poetry to an extent not seen since my late teens. I was reading far more, discovering far more, and trying new things thanks to writing groups and workshops. Yet the idea of trying to be a professional poet seemed so far from a realistic pursuit that I only ever thought about it as something I just did because. Not a hobby exactly. Not just for myself, but also not exactly for others. At least not yet. It was during those few years that I found myself not only beginning to develop and learn more, but also discovered that it was potentially possible to link this creative outlet with academia. I have views on things like workshops and creative writing MFAs that are perhaps a little different to the way others think about them. This is definitely something I want to talk about at some point, but not now. Blogging had taken up a great deal of my creative writing energy after graduation, but it exploded when I went sailing for more than 3 months before returning to Edinburgh. That period saw me launch 2 different blogs, start taking Instagram more seriously, and making my first moves towards YouTube. Then I moved away from Edinburgh again and got myself stuck in Inverclyde. Somewhere that I don't want to be too negative about, as in some ways it's a spectacular place. As a place to be broke and officially homeless, though, it sucks. Getting around was extremely difficult and expensive. So almost all my attention shifted to trying to get back to Edinburgh and find a day job to support me. I imagined myself taking the time I had spare outside of work in the first UNESCO City of Literature, further developing my writing. I saw myself gaining some further qualifications in literature and a bit of art history and film studies. Then I would go do an MFA in the States before returning to Edinburgh for a PhD and building a career in teaching and academia. Yet time and time again, this was pushed away from me. I wrote less and less, got out and took photographs less, dreamed less. Then came COVID. Suddenly the stillness was imposed, and every effort felt little more than Sisyphus endeavour. 3 years later, and somehow that eternal rock rolling came to an end. I was offered the apartment in Edinburgh and gained a part-time job. At last the opportunity was here. The chance to finally see that dream come true. Yet, I hadn't really written for nearly 3 years. The habit was gone. Moving was good. Having my own space was good. Having the opportunity to get out and about, engaging with creative works, was good. None of it produced a new habit, though. Writing came in dribs and drabs, when it came at all. Inspiration was all around me, but something just wasn't bringing it all together. Like building a house by a forest but wondering where you left all the nails and a hammer. The dream was vapour now, seemingly impossible to hold on to. Then I began to find a new community online. Threads, that had seemed like a laughable lost cause at first, suddenly picked up and filled with what I can only describe as my people. A whole bunch of bookish geeks, nerds, and creative folk, all seeking the same kind of support and shared experience. There were my people, the people to write for. That's how I got to where I am now. This podcast may not be as regular as I'd like it to be, yet, but it was one of the first instances of me being compelled to write again. I've been going to the Scottish Poetry Library and gorging on poetry from around the world recently. There is a kind of quiet meeting room available in the Poetry Library, and I've been considering seeing if I can use it to record this podcast. That way, I'd have somewhere to go to work, and somewhere that I'm not going to have to deal with noisy neighbours and the rubbish truck. It's also made me consider going back onto YouTube to start vlogging my life as a poet in Edinburgh. That's all while I'm shifting my new blog into reviews of the stuff I see and do. Places I eat, theatre productions, movies, music, exhibitions, etc. Things I can build up while I put far more focus into that dream again. I'd love you to come along and be part of making this dream reality. For now, though, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time on the next episode of Lost Lancastrian.